Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome all to this conversation of MEC, multiple access edge computing and edge computing. And the report is by Sense of Feel in collaboration with RCR Wireless. And as part of the report, we talked to different people to share their views on this topic. And today I have with me John Reister, who is the Vice President of Marketing and Product Management at Vasona Networks. John, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So let me ask you in a couple of sentences, what is that Vasona does? And what is that you do at Vasona?
Sure, yeah, I run product and marketing, and Vasona is an edge computing company, and we were, founded on the principle of finding value for the operators with computing capabilities at the edge of the network.
Right. So, over the last few years, we've been all talking about the cloud, centralizing everything, just removing everything from the edge, basically. And now, in the last few years, there has been much more, an increasing attention on what's happening at the edge. And so, why is that mobile operators should care about edge computing?
Well, I think, edge computing is one of the things it does is it enables them to achieve a higher degree of flexibility in their networks, and that gives them a lot more agility in how quickly they can move and how quickly they can introduce services. It has the potential to reduce cost by, enables them to optimize their networks better, and then they can introduce new service capabilities for their customers. And I think ultimately it's about they're able to create more value in a way that's unique. When you implement things in the core or in the data center, they tend to be things that can be easily copied by anybody, on the internet. Whereas when you do things in your network, it's much more sustainable differentiation, much more unique capability, and creating that value for your customers.
And I guess because also each operator can do it in a slightly different way, so it's not all doing the same, offering the same type of advantages. But now, are there any challenges that come with it? Usually there's always some.
Yes, and I think one of the challenges, certainly one of the questions is when you say edge computing, where's the edge? And I think one of the challenges we hear from the operators is, I've got 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 cell sites, and if you're going to tell me I have to deploy a server at each one of those, or even one server for every 10 of those, that's thousands and thousands of servers that have to be deployed and managed, and it makes it's not only expensive, it's an operational mess. So I think one of the important things that the operators have raised that we certainly address is deploying more at an aggregation point where there tends to be anywhere from 100 to 500 or even 1,000 cell sites that come in through that MEC, that edge compute implementation. And so you're 2 orders of magnitude, almost 3 orders of magnitude less, or maybe I should say more scalable, because there's so many fewer places you have to deploy. So I think that's one of the challenges. I think the other big area that we encounter is this is an inline element. In order to do the kinds of things that you want to do with these services, you need to be inline. And as soon as you're inline, affecting tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of customers from this installation, reliability becomes very critical. And so achieving, high availability very high reliability is essential. And so, proving that you can achieve that with this kind of infrastructure is key.
Yeah, I want to go back to where is the edge later when we talk about different use cases. But before we get there, can you tell us what is that you do how is Vasona addressing the challenges that you just mentioned?
Sure. Well, our implementation is software based, and we can be deployed as close to the edge as the operator wants. But for the applications that we do, and for the kind of capabilities you want to achieve with the platform, we think that being at the aggregation point works really well. So we've implemented capabilities to be able to sit at that point and be able to sit in line and do the traffic classification, able to map from that point, we can map the users and figure out what cells they're in. We can then classify the traffic and then guide it, through the applications that the operator wants to apply for those users.
Right. So now you have been doing basically mobile edge computing way before it had a name. So how long have you been doing this for?
Yeah, we introduced the product a little over 4 years ago, and we call it an edge application controller, which pretty similar actually. So we're glad it has a home in the standards community. So we introduced that to provide unique value from this point at the edge with the low latency capabilities and being able to manage the challenges that operators are currently facing, not just the ones on the road to 5G, but the ones they're currently facing. And we're broadly deployed, so we have over 100,000 cells deployed in Europe and the Americas.
Yeah, so you're beyond the proof of concept stage that, most of the MEC trials are at that stage. So what is that you've learned so far from the operators as you try to help them? What did you find out?
Well, I mentioned already the operational challenges are, very important. The reliability, being able to interoperate transparently. You have to be able to insert into the network very transparently, very easy to install. So those kinds of things have been really important. And then identifying the applications that affect them today and are needed today. So they're struggling to deal with the onslaught of video traffic, and a lot of the tools that have been tried have been made obsolete, and so there's a lot of need in dealing with all that traffic and keeping the customers happy and committed to them as a service provider.
So yeah, obviously video it's a big issue if nothing else, because so much of the traffic is video. But and there clearly there is a role for moving the content and the processing, the optimization of content towards the edge. But there's also a point where, as we were talking before about where is the edge. If you put it too much towards the edge, then it's not as effective. And if you put it too centralized, it's also not effective. So how do you find the right balance there? Where is the right place for the edge in terms of computing?
Yeah, and certainly for video. And, we're not big believers in caching. We think as you get close to the edge, it's not, the caching is not valuable, and it's not really helping your issues with the air interface anyway. But we do think traffic management, and one of the MEC use cases is throughput guidance. And we do think those are important applications that really help in improving the quality, that you get over, existing infrastructure. So really avoiding having running to stay in place of constantly having to throw, tons and tons of resources in new cell sites and cell splits and so on. So how that drives you in terms of how close to the edge you have to be. The traffic is largely encrypted. And in order to figure out that you're dealing with a video session and to understand that it's a video session and what its needs are, you have to see the beginning of the session being set up. And if you are too close to the edge, then when the user does a handover to another cell, the MEC application on that other cell would not know what that session was, so it would lose context, and you would have this very complex, need to hand over state from MEC instance to MEC instance. It gets very complex. And so by being located at more, of an aggregation point like we are, where we're dealing with, as I said, several hundred cell sites, the vast majority of handovers that we see are between cells and between cell sectors that are covered under the same MEC instance. So when a user hands over from one cell to another, we already know the conditions on the cell they're going to before the very first data packet is going over that new cell. We see the handover as the control messages are causing the handover to happen. So even before the data is moving over that new cell, we know they're going to be in that new cell. We already know the conditions of that new cell, and can adjust and take that into account in our traffic management, essentially before it happens.
Yeah, so there is a whole new way for operators to manage traffic, and clearly for video it's very important. But what about the other type of traffic? Is the other type of traffic affected as well?
Yeah, well, one of the benefits you can do with managing traffic at the application type level is you can manage down the latency for those services where the user is directly interacting with the network. And so you can keep the queues much shallower. And because of that, the latency that you see during the busy hour can be cut by 25 or 30%. And that affects browsing, it affects your social media applications. So the benefits are not just for video, they're definitely for all types of services. And obviously for coming, IoT services.
Yeah, and I guess it also gives operators a better view of what goes on in their networks.
Yeah, so part of edge computing, it might not be talked about as much, but part of edge computing is you're now sort of linking together not just information about the users and the applications that they're using and the types of applications, but what cells they're in, how busy those cells are, how congested those cells are. So you're able to put all those pieces of data together. And, one of the prime benefits is you can now manage your capital investment with a focus to the quality of experiences that you're delivering for those applications that are important to your customer base. So instead of just looking at low-layer metrics of the network, you can now actually manage your CapEx that way, and that allows you substantial savings and is a big contributor to the business case. Business case.
You said it. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about that. So as you said before, you want to avoid clearly the risk of having servers everywhere at every cell site. But you still need to add some hardware. You need to add, this is something that you add on top of what you have. So that's an additional cost.
It is.
How can we explain, what is the business case? What does the business case look like?
And I think this is one of the keys. You have a MEC platform, and then you're going to layer applications on top of it. And there's certainly the potential for new revenue streams, and there's some are relatively far flung, and some potentially closer in. But as you said, putting in this platform, you can talk virtualization as long as you want, but the historical cost savings of virtualization is because you had a massive server farm in your data center of all these purpose, directed servers that were being underutilized. And that's not the case with MEC. So it's a new investment. And so the business case has to prove in. And there are benefits on the revenue side from new services. We see the benefits on improving quality of experience in terms of getting a lot more customer advocacy and customer advocates who believe in your network because of the reduced stalls and lower latency on the browsing and the social media and so on. But clearly the biggie is you don't have to manage your network. You don't have to constantly chase after the peaks, the peak demand in your network. The problem is human nature is such that people remember the bad experiences much more than the good experiences. And it only takes, 5 or 10 bad experiences a week for users to think you're a lousy service provider. And that can easily happen in those peak hours. So you've been in this mode of having to build to those peaks, and it's really expensive. By putting in a mobile edge compute system, you're actively managing the traffic and managing the services. And because of that, you can make the quality so much better during those peak times. And that allows you to not have to, chase your CapEx after those instantaneous spikes in usage that are causing those. And so that capital benefit is certainly a key part of the business case, being able to focus your capital.
So I guess the business case becomes a little bit more subtle here. It's not just adding numbers, but just seeing what the resources that you have can do and how happy your subscribers are. So it requires a little bit of a different thinking, mental model behind it.
It does. And I think there is a transition in thinking that is starting to happen where I think everybody looks at the growth in demand, and they look at the revenue, and those lines are not parallel on any chart. So I think there's an awareness that you can't continue to spend to meet that level of demand without something radically changing. So it does require new thinking and an ability to focus your capital investment to maximize the quality of experience. And I think that's one of the things that MEC can enable the operators to do.
Now, on a sort of a parallel line here, with edge computing, there is a possibility of content providers taking a more active role, and they might be involved into rolling out or participating in some way of infrastructure because they stand to benefit from it. So what do you think, do they have a role? And if so, what is their role?
Well, this may be the best part, to be honest. I think we've had a model that's been, I won't call it a hostile relationship, but there's certainly been a situation where the applications create all these demands on the network. And I think here, with mobile edge computing, you have an opportunity for a very collaborative approach there. And, you can take IoT, you can take throughput guidance, and there are clear cases where you're now essentially having levers or information in the network that is being shared in real time that gives the ability to evolve that relationship. So with throughput guidance, for example, the operator is telling the content provider, the video streaming content provider, in real time, this is the best that this user can get at this time, and let's jump right to that rate. And don't try to go higher because it's just going to congest the network, and you don't need to go lower and harm the quality. So you share that information, and it's best for the customer, who is really the customer of both that content provider as well as the mobile operator. IoT, another example where you have the ability to provide, much better security, and to bring that, provide lower latency, bring that IoT traffic, around the core through a VPN into a private cloud, create a very secure capability with low latency, for those types of services. So you're just providing levers and information and tools that really are allowing this tremendous positive working relationship between the service provider and the content provider.
And I guess that might address some of the issues that we have with encryption, because if there is collaboration, then encryption no longer creates a barrier to optimizing around traffic.
Well, encryption is a tricky one. Of course, there's two layers of encryption. The operator puts their own encryption when the backhaul is over a shared type of environment or a non-owned type of environment. And so they run IPsec tunnels from the node B site back to the network, and that's certainly affects where and how mobile edge computing gets deployed. And then you have, the encryption that the content provider puts on their content. And I think I don't expect that to change. I think, end users want to ensure privacy and so on. From Vasona's perspective, we have the ability to classify and understand encrypted traffic. We don't decrypt it in any way, but we're able to just figure out what type it is and then make sure it gets the treatment it deserves. And if there are situations where you are going to host it on the MEC platform, which would be the case in IoT, for example, then you're absolutely right. The point of the certificate exchange in that case would move on to the MEC platform for that.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you the sort of obligatory question, which has to talk about 5G. So there are different schools of thought here. So MEC is clearly helping to go towards 5G, but is it required? So do we need to wait for 5G to have MEC, or is the other way around? Who is enabling what, and who needs what?
Yeah, that's a great question. And 5G is about a lot more than just the radio. And I think there's huge implications for the backhaul. When you get these radios that have much shorter range, you're going to need more of them, and the backhaul gets a lot bigger and more complex. And I think MEC is really a great step in that direction. It's bringing down the latency. It's providing the kind of capabilities into the network that you're aiming for with 5G. So it's a stepping stone, and I think the nice thing about MEC is it has a business case and addresses today's problems while taking you in the direction you want to go.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So let's have a peek at what's going on in the next 5 years. What are you guys working on? That is not too confidential that we can share with the audience.
So there's, obviously there's, MEC standards are not finished yet. So right now, we're an edge compute platform, and we're, embracing the MEC standards as they move along. There's MEC platform capabilities, and there's MEC applications. So we're working on, new applications. IoT area is one area. Security, quality of experience. We continue to believe that that's a big focus. And then on the platform side, it's integrating down into the network. So you can create a new server farm but there's obviously other initiatives going on with the packet core, with, Cloud RAN, that also are, NFV driven, and you could certainly start to see intersections as you get far enough out.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Looks like you have a very pretty busy schedule over the next few years.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time. I imagine it's a little bit of a scary time with also great opportunity for the operators. The demands being placed on them are enormous. The expectations are very high, but then they're in the driver's seat, and so I think it's a good place to be.
It's an opportunity to diversify, isn't it?
Yes.
John, thank you so much for sharing your views with us today.
Thank you. I appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for listening in. This was a conversation on MEC and edge computing for a report by Sense of Feeling collaboration with RCR Wireless. Thank you all.